Hello and welcome to the Random Thought Show. My name's Jacob Tober.
And my name's Darren McInnes. On the show we talk about anything and everything in fitness, high performance and health. So in today's episode we've got a very special guest, James Russell from Iron Edge. James has a fascinating life story and some really just great insights. I enjoyed it immensely. I reckon you guys will too. His experiences as a commando and the British military, his experiences through strength and conditioning, through various roles in the fitness industry, and now as business development manager for Iron Edge. Just fascinating listening and some terrific insights. It's long enough and big enough that it was a two-parter, so this is part one, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, welcome to the Core Advantage Random Thoughts podcast with a very special guest, James Russell from Iron Edge. Hey James, how you doing?
Good, thanks mate. Thanks for having me. Really excited.
That's very exciting. So listen, we've got heaps to chat about, but before we dive into all of your fascinating and varied career things that you've done, tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now at Iron Edge. And
Been with Iron Edge for about 18 months now. Moved around, done a few different roles there as well. Now a bit of a general man doing a lot of different things.
So your business development sort of?
Bit of everything, yeah, a little bit. Overseeing product conceptualization and marketing, just sort of helping set the strategy and the direction of the business with the director, Rick, who's a fantastic guy to work with.
That's great. And it's kind of the culmination of a whole, and we're going to dive back into all the other things you've done. It is kind of the culmination of a whole lot of roles have sort of led you to this point, hasn't it?
So many. I don't think there's a job in health and fitness that I haven't worked in yet. But if there is, I'll find it and I'll try and finish off and round off my career nicely as well.
So we'll chat about that in a minute. But we're about to go to a pro tip, an Iron Edge pro tip. But before we do, what's your favourite piece of Iron Edge equipment at the moment?
Probably the roller pad. So basically what it is it's a pad that you can attach into any of our racks, the assault rack, the matrix, the iron cage, anything like that. You can adjust it easily and it goes up to any height. And basically you can do single leg, rear foot elevated single leg squats. You can do single leg hip thrusts. You can do regular hip thrusts. You can do Nordics on it as well. So it's basically the utility of the piece. And that's what we're after at Iron Edge. We're about taking something that has many different utilities off a range of different movements and exercises.
So nice one. All right, we'll throw to the pro tip now and we'll see you guys in a minute.
Hey guys, it's Jacob here again. I'm on the gym floor with another Iron Edge pro tip. In this one, I'm going to show you how holding the kettlebell in just subtly different ways can change the emphasis for your exercise. In this case, a rear foot elevated split squat. So I've got my back leg, my non-working leg, up on the roller pad right now. I grab my kettlebell, and the first variation, if I hold it in a goblet squat position, I can get very much a front squat style squat. So I get a lot of dorsiflexion, a lot of quads, and a lot of knee action going on. Whereas if I take the kettlebell, hold it down by my side, using the roller pad, I can now roll my shin back on the roller a bit, get a little more vertical position through the shin, and get more of a hip dominant kind of back squat type shape, if you will. So just because of the roller pad, because I can roll my shin up and down it, and by changing the position of the kettlebell, I can change the emphasis and the focus of what is essentially the exact same exercise, making it hip dominant or knee dominant, depending on what my goals are. It's that simple, and that's your Iron Edge pro tip.
So, it's hard to know where to start with you, but I guess I'll start with how we first got to know each other, which was you have a very interesting role in the Melbourne strength and conditioning community in that you are a real unifying force. This is an industry where we can be a little backstabby if we don't know each other, whereas you took an approach of let's actually reverse that. Before we go into the history before that, tell me about why you started and it started out as the Melbourne Special Interest Group. What's it called now?
We associated with the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association, or ASCA at first, and became a SIG, or a Special Interest Group. It's now called the Melbourne Strength and Conditioning Coaches, or the MSCC.
Yep.
And it's not doing a lot at the moment.
It's a little on the quiet.
It's a little on the quiet. We need to revamp that, I think.
But yeah, tell us about why you started that, because I think that tells people more about you than a lot of other things. I think your view on that was great.
Basically, I saw the most powerful thing that I could see in the industry. So I was in uni at the time. I was second year uni, and I was sort of looking at what I wanted from the industry and how I was going to get there and what were the key sort of points to get forward or to get ahead. And I realised that a lot of the people I knew were getting jobs through people they knew.
Yep.
I found that there was either a very strong network of friendships or people tended to know each other and really didn't like each other without even having met, which is the strangest
There's
thing
so
to
much
me.
of that.
It's the word. I find the industry can be very competitive at times. And if someone sees someone, they know of them, but they don't actually know them, they're very quick to judge them and put them
Threatened
down.
a little bit.
Threatened, exactly. But what I started to see was when these people met, they actually realised they had a lot in common and they could work together and they could probably become good friends. And you know, the one thing about sports science, strength and conditioning is we're extremely passionate people who like to surround ourselves with like-minded people. So I just thought, let's try and get a whole bunch of people in the room together and see what happens. It started off with about 17 people came down to the first one.
Yeah, right.
And out of that 17, 15 people all knew each other.
Yeah.
Just people I went to uni with and mates of mine. And there was one person we didn't know, and his name was Matt Woolner, and he was working with Melbourne Demons at the time. And you know, Matt and I are still extremely good friends to this day. It's
That's awesome.
someone I met and just clicked with straight away. And I thought, all right, well, we've met one person here. You know, this could have some legs, and just slowly grew from there. And the more people that started to meet and build relationships and friendships, and the more jobs that went through this place. I was surprised that, you know, after a meeting, about 5 or 6 jobs would be given out the next day to people they'd met at one of our events as well.
That's just great. And I mean, it's something that Melbourne was sorely in need of. We've got 35 professional sports teams in Melbourne. Like, we are such an S&C hub. And so many academies, and the Victorian Institute of Sport. There's a lot going on in strength and conditioning in Victoria and in Melbourne in particular. But there just wasn't that connection point.
Yep.
I really enjoyed it. The events that I came along to, and we hosted a couple here, which was great. And it's just terrific to get to meet people and, you know, put names to, not so much names to faces, because you know who the people are, but actually just get to know the person a little bit.
It's a small community. We all know of each other. We just didn't know each other. And I thought creating that common link would change things. And it actually had a massive response. And, you know, we went from, 17 or so people at that first event to, you know, what did we have? Over 70 people for the Brett Bartholomew seminar.
Which
you
was
know?
awesome. Yeah.
And you get a lot of the same faces. But I found, depending on the theme of the talk or the guest that we had on, you'd get a sort of different subcategory of people that would come along, and you'd meet new people. The most that I got out of each event would be afterwards, when we'd have a little question time or a bit more informal time. You know, we like to go for a burger around the corner or something like that and have a beer. And, you know, I've made very close friends that I catch up with on the regularly now, with nothing to do with the group. They're just good people. And,
That's great, isn't it?
you know, we have like-minded, we just think the same way, I suppose.
And to what extent do you think your perspective on that and your general attitude to life is informed by your military experience? Which I want to go right back to that in a moment, but it seems to me that there has to be a linkage there as well. You see things a bit differently to the rest of us, relatively coddled people, in terms of, you know, who haven't seen as much of, you know.
I think you understand the importance of the team around you and the power in that. I think when you're really tested physically and mentally in a range of different environments, whether it's, you know, a war zone like Afghanistan or Iraq, or even just doing some sort of training package or some sort of fitness training or something like that, you start to understand that the support network of the people directly around you basically depends whether you're going to be successful or not. You know, you can be the best person in the world, you can have a lot of skill sets, you can be smart, you can be fit, you can be determined, but that means nothing without the right people around to make sure that you're supported and getting the most out of yourselves. And I think that then transferred into starting this group, and I went, all right, well, I've had that in the military. I've had a very strong group around me. It's time to do the same thing and create the same thing for other people as well.
Such a powerful thing. With Core Advantage, my thing has always been, I'm never going to be the best at any single task, but I want to be the best at building a team, because then, you know, you'll have amazing people around you. So,
in this industry, you know, people are your product. You want to make sure that you bring them in, they're being developed. There's a lot of areas that people look to feel satisfied in, you know. They need to be paid properly. They need to be respected and made to feel like their thoughts actually mean something. You need to be developing them both mentally, physically, whatever. You know, you need to find out what's important to people, and you need to make sure they're getting that. And that keeps good people around, I think.
I agree. So let's take a back step. Take us back to let's go back to high school, and I want to hear the story in order to a certain extent.
Geez, high school, it's a long time ago and not something I fitted into
So
or enjoyed very well.
did you finish high school?
No, I didn't. I dropped out. I finished year 10. I attempted year 11, just couldn't get
And
into
where
it.
was that? Where were you growing up?
I grew up in Brighton, so St Leonard's College in Brighton.
Yep.
I decided then that wasn't the environment for me, so my parents said before giving up on school, try a slightly different environment. So I went to Sandy Tech, it was called at the time. So it was just year 11 and year 12, you know it?
Yep.
No uniforms, not as much structure. It was a bit more arty as well, thinking that might sort of, ignite some creative flames in me, but no. About a month or two in, I decided that wasn't for me. And then I sort of started this spiral, I suppose, for a year or so where I was just, wandering around aimlessly with not much idea of where I wanted to go or what I wanted to be when I grew up.
That's a hard time, isn't it? Because you just don't know what you want to do. I had the same thing. I drifted around for quite a while and not knowing what I want to do as well. Yeah.
I think it's good though. I mean, I think everyone goes through it at some stage. I was lucky enough to go through it when I was a little bit younger, and while I wasn't going to school, I was trying lots of things socially and hanging out with my mates and having adventures, what you want to do at that age. And it wasn't very focused in one direction, but, it ultimately helped me to come on to the next chapter of my life and where I wanted to go.
And so how did you go from, so you've dropped out of school and you're drifting a little. How did you go from that to I'm going to pick up and change countries and go military?
I was actually travelling the UK. So I went over to the UK for 6 months in 2003, and my immediate family's here, my mum, my dad and my brother, but the majority of my family's actually overseas. So all of my uncles were British military, my cousins, even my aunties, my grandparents, everyone. Right. My whole family.
Family business.
That's it. So I was, and probably why mum moved over here was to keep me away from that. I was never actually allowed to play with guns when I was younger, funnily enough. Yep, because my mum didn't want me going down the same route as the rest of the family. But that backfired on her nicely. But I started travelling around the UK and spending time with my uncles, and some of them were still serving at the time, and some of them had served as well, and the majority of them were with quite a prestigious unit called the Parachute Regiment, which is a particularly savage infantry unit that jump out of planes. They're literally cannon fodder. So traditionally they would jump in behind enemy lines and they would create an enemy line and hold it. They would get absolutely slaughtered while the main troops could move up and back the position. Wow. So they were suicide troops. They were started in 1940s. Back in World War II they were started. So they're a relatively new unit, and they were taken from the unit nutters, people that were a little bit tapped in the head just because of the nature of their job. Yeah. A lot of the casualties would even happen before they actually landed on the ground. So they'd either be shot down, or on landing they'd break a leg or break their ankle, things like that. Yeah, parachuting in a military context is not efficient at all. But
because you're a very slow-moving target, aren't you?
100%.
And you've got a long time. It's like the opposite of clay shooting.
Pretty much, yeah. You're a sitting duck basically. Yeah. But they jump from 1,000 feet, so they're not high anyway. It's not a big trip down to the ground, and they're static line, so it pulls their chute out. They don't have any free fall time or anything like that. Yeah. But mostly, there's a lot of casualties on landing. It's uneven ground. Your perception might be out. You've got a lot of kit hanging between your legs and on your back as well with your parachute. So, yeah.
Fascinating. So you hung around with them, and that ignited that spark that your mum was trying to hide.
Trying to push down inside me. Yeah, definitely. I actually came back here renewed, reinvigorated, and decided that was going to be my goal. I was originally training for the Australian Commandos at the time, the Australian Special Forces. I spent about a year of my life going through the process of that and training hard. And I got to pretty much the last stage, which was a psychometric evaluation, and the psychiatrist said that I was too young and didn't have enough life experience. At that age, I would have been, just gone 18. So
pretty young.
Yeah, she said, go either join the infantry or go out and do something with your life and come back. And I sat on the couch for 2 days after that. I remember being just utterly gutted, something I'd put in probably a year of my life into or so was just...
And when you say training, is that training by yourself? Is that within a military context to prepare for? Is that you?
Yeah, training by myself in a military context. I was putting in 5 to 6 hours a day. I was basically doing, 1 to 2 triathlons a day. I didn't know what I was doing back then, no idea. I just thought cardiovascular fitness was the key, and if I can, run, swim, cycle, push up, you know, pull up and do sit-ups, and that's pretty much my routine as well. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd probably go for a massive ride down to the pool, I'd swim a couple of K, I'd ride back, then I'd go out for a run, then I'd come back, then I'd do push-ups, pull-ups and sit-ups for an hour, and then rest and then repeat the next day, you know. This is me at the age of, you know, sort of 18 or 19, and just absolutely consumed my life. I suddenly had a target. That's what the sort of person I am. I don't just have a few things in the fire. I just go, right, this is what I want to do. I absolutely put the blinkers on and I don't stop till I make it happen, I suppose. It's always been my way.
So you got told you're too young, you need to get some more life experience. And then what did you do? You sat on the couch for a couple of days, just devastated?
Yeah, devastated. And my uncle was actually, one of my uncles was living with us at the moment. He'd worked with the British Commandos. And he's like, well, why don't you just go over there and join up? I was like, I can't just go over there and join the military. He's like, well, why not? And I went, okay. I went straight through to, would it have been the computer? Jeez, I can't remember. No, I spoke to my dad and we went old school through the travel agent because that's how you used to do things back then. So I just booked a flight to the UK in 2 weeks.
Right, okay.
And literally flew over there, walked into a recruitment office. That was it. No, didn't contact them before I went over there, didn't organise anything in advance.
So just walked in?
Just took a couple of $1,000 in my bank account, walked over there, found myself an apartment and walked into a careers office,
Wow. And so joined up, like that was relatively straightforward?
Yeah, it was easy. I mean, I had to go through pretty much the same process of what we've been through here, but they were a lot more willing to take people into different programs as well. So I went through the medicals, I went through the assessments, the psychologicals. That was always a nerve-wracking thing for me. I'd put my life on hold and flown to the other side of the world if I was going to get told the same thing. But, you know, military's built into the English culture. People join a lot younger, a lot bigger percentage of the a lot bigger percentage of the population join up. It's sort of almost like a sort of rite of passage over there in the UK, which you don't really get over here. So over here, I probably know 1 or 2 people that have actually served in the military. Over there, going through school, maybe even sort of, you know, at least 5 or 6 of your mates would be joining the military after school.
Really?
So, and they would have a family member that served or 2.
Right.
Yeah, it's big in the culture.
Do you know why? Is that from World War II being on the doorstep so much, or like do you have any sociological thoughts on why it's more just integrated?
Yeah, I think they pride themselves on their military. England was, you know, a big force in the world for a long time based off their army and their navy, and I think they have a lot of pride in that now. I think they've been fighting a war every day in the world for the last 500 years, with the exception of 3 days after the Suez Canal incident.
Really?
So every day in the world, England has soldiers in another country fighting.
Active,
yeah.
Wow.
With the exception of 3 days.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So they take a lot of pride in that, you know. It's something that is usually passed from father to son, mother to daughter as well. And, you know, most of my mates that I served with, their parents were all in the military as well. And I'm more than certainly their kids would be joining up as well.
And how was it, speaking of culture, how is it culturally for an Aussie going and joining? Was that, were you welcomed into the fold? Like, was that challenging? Because that whole thing sounds terrible. Like there's multiple levels of terrifying to me in what you're talking about. Yeah, how was that side of things?
Oh, they love it. They love Aussies over there. You've got a really great name. Yeah, first thing they do is give you an affectionate nickname. I'm told it's affectionate. But don't know. Mine was Skip. And still a lot of my good mates that I know that from the UK that are over here now, it's still Skip as well.
Skip. Okay.
So they give you a nice nickname and usually rip the piss out of you as well, you know.
Yep.
Take the mick, as they would like to say. But yeah, they definitely love Australians. I remember, you know, my first couple of weeks there, you start off with about 80 blokes or something like that in this big...
And so is this basic training, or is this it's been put straight into an advanced? Like, how does that all work?
It's unique in the UK. You go to a place called Commando Training Centre Royal Marines, which is based in Lympston in Devon, down in the southwest. Mm-hmm. And all of your training is carried out there. But you move from phase to phase. So you start off in your basic, you move to your infantry, then you move to advanced infantry, and then you move on to the commando phase at the end, which is the last 6 weeks. So the first 2 weeks in your basic are basically spent in this big hangar type building with about 80 blokes. Everyone's fresh faced and, you know, coming from different backgrounds, and I would be just minding my own business, ironing something or cleaning something, because most of your time spent ironing, cleaning, or trying to sleep if you can.
Yeah.
And people would just come up to me like, "Excuse me, I've heard you're Australian," and I'd be like, "Yeah, like what's it like? Do you ride kangaroos to school? Do you have pet koalas?" You know, most of them have seen Neighbours, and it's their only reference point as well. And people just wouldn't leave me alone. They'd be like, I'd literally have people following me around asking me to speak, and
really,
it was a bit of it was
novelty.
Yeah, they loved it. Oh, in a couple of weeks, they hated me. I remember one bloke actually said after 4 weeks, he's like, "I'd never met an Australian before, and I was so excited, and I don't like you." And I was like, "Sorry, mate, I didn't mean to."
And he was legit.
He was legit, yeah. Aaron Butcher, I still catch up with him actually. He moved to Perth, funnily enough, not too long ago, and I went and had a beer with him. And he's one of my close mates now. But the strangest thing happened. I was getting invited, like we'd get some time off, earlier on, you'd get maybe a day off or something like that, or a night off, and everyone wanted me to come back and meet their family. Like it's this village mentality in the UK where it's a small country, it's a massive population, but everyone still has this village culture or this village mentality. So, a place like Lympston, which is a really small village or town, it's people don't go outside that. Like I met people that had never left their village, they'd never left the UK before. And these are people, signing up to join one of the most elite fighting units in the world and are probably going to be travelling around quite a bit. So it was quite interesting going through that. And I was lucky growing up, my parents took us all over the world. We travelled a lot as well. Dad, it was a big part of mum and dad's life, still is now. But meeting these people who had never actually left their own village before, and then they're meeting me. And I remember meeting a guy who'd never had KFC or McDonald's, anything.
Right.
So he proceeded to catch up for those first 20 years of his life in the next 3 months.
Yeah,
All he would eat would be McDonald's and KFC. Absolutely loved it. He was from this small island off the coast of Scotland called Stornoway in the Isle of Lewis, up in Stornoway. And it was just, this kid was one of the most robust blokes I'd ever met in my life, Could just run all day, could just be sitting outside in the rain and absolutely insane. But these people would just take me up to spend time with their family. And I remember once we got in late, we went out, this is up in Sheffield, so up in the north of the country, and we got on the sauce. And I remember waking up in the morning, I could hear like a bit of hubbub downstairs, and I came downstairs. I remember walking down the stairs to the bottom where the living room was, and there was 30 people in there. And they stopped as I came down the stairs and just stared at me, and then there's this like applause and everything. And I was like, oh, geez, what's happened now? And all the cousins and aunties and uncles had come around to meet this Australian bloke that was staying for the night, and I was passed around the room and I couldn't even get my bearings. It was insane. Like they just made me feel so welcome and so special. And, it's just what the English people are like. They're just,
fascinating. Yeah. That's cool. So back into the training, because I'm very interested in how it all evolves. So you've got a couple of weeks of basic training.
Yep.
And what are you learning then?
You're learning how not to sleep and not to eat and how to polish things, basically.
Yep.
I think there was a rule, if it moves, salute it. If it doesn't move, polish it. That was all you needed to know for the first 2 weeks or so. I think it was 4 weeks, actually. The first 4 weeks is literally you're getting your basic education on military life and military practice. And then at night, you might finish your activities by, 9, 10 at night, whatever they may be. And then you've got to organise everything for the next day, which is polished, cleaned. So you'd have these locker inspections. Every locker had to be identical. I'm talking about you'd have your coat hangers and they would measure the gap between the coat hangers. Everything had to be A4'd in the exact same style. So this is before camera phones. So you had to have your old digital camera. You'd go along, take a picture of the one locker you were going to work off, and then everyone would you'd be up until about 2 a.m. just ironing and making things immaculate and scrubbing things. And you'd fail every time anyway. You were going to fail. It got to the stage where you'd be like, all right, it doesn't really matter what we do here or how good we are. We're failing because they need to instill that discipline and, get you sort of pumped up. And
so what's the rationale? So that obviously instilling discipline.
Yeah.
Is there more to it than that? Is it just about doing what you're told, or is there also a sense of developing that orderliness so that, like in a nice workshop, you've got a place for everything and everything in its place.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be, it's annoying in a workshop to look around for a spanner, but to look around for a weapon is not, you need to be fast. Is it about efficiency as well, or is it just about the discipline, do you think?
I think it's actually building realistic expectations of success and failure. I think it's instilling the worst case scenario into you. It's trying to beat you down. It's trying to go, right, no matter what I do, it's not right. I'm not getting this right. How do I proceed? Do I just give up and go, well, stuff this? Nothing I do is good enough. It's not going to right. I'm pulling myself out and going home, or I'm going to break down. Or do you just go, do you know what? I'm just going to keep going, keep pushing. Sometime it's going to be right. I'm just going to keep going. And I think that's probably the main thing I took out of it. I mean, it also has some crossover to, we live on ship a lot as well. We do a lot of amphibious operations. We live in small accommodation on top of each other. If your equipment's spread out all over the place, one, like you say, you don't have awareness of where that is if things get hectic and you need to go quickly. But also it's discourteous to other members of your team. It'll start to build, build a bit of animosity.
It's a friction point. Yeah.
Friction point. Oh, and when you put a bunch of people with big personalities in a small place, add on a little bit of stress from operations or high sort of tense training stuff, you get a recipe for disaster, which we can definitely talk about later. But I've seen a lot of infighting and things like that. But I think this is introducing you to that at an early age. You are living on top of each other with a big group of with some big personalities. And they're beating you down from the start and going, nothing you do is good enough. It's not good enough. What are you going to do? How are you going to respond to that? Are you going to keep pushing and try and keep that standard at excellence, or are you just going to give up and go home?
Because they want to fail in terms of their recruiting. They want to fail fast, don't they? They want to find out who's not going to be a goer.
Get rid of the time wasters.
Yeah.
People who have watched Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Commando for the last 2 weeks and just thought, I want to go in and blow stuff up and have fun. It's definitely part of the job, but it's a very small part of the job as well. It's not anything like you expect it to be. There's a lot of what we say, hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
Hurry up, get there, and then sit around for a few hours waiting for something. So and that's the stress that sort of affects you the most, is these big lulls or down periods, and then all of a sudden, bang, it's just you're on. You need to be switched on. You need to be ready to go. You need to put maximum intensity in, and then it's just back down to cruising again. So.
Sounds fascinating. So literally you might have a day or two of just nothing going on and there's a lull, and then it's just...
Yep, when you're out in the unit, depending on what you're doing, it's almost like periodization in strength training, and so you can't be up and on fire all the time. It just wears you down. It wears your nerve down. If you're constantly having to perform at 100%, you're running around, you're constantly stressed. So you have lulls, you have down periods, you have up periods. It's kind of like that undulating periodization method, I suppose, is the best way to explain it.
So this is probably difficult for you to get your head around how interesting this stuff is, because it's so familiar to you. But this is all fascinating to me, and I'm sure to our listeners. So they're trying to filter you out, and you have the basic. Then you take us through the steps of how you get from there through to. And actually, I'm interested in knowing. Let's go from here. What did your unit do? What was your role?
What was our focus?
Yeah.
So through the training, you're just tested, and you're training and you're being taught things, and then you're tested at the same point as well. So it's a steep learning curve, almost too steep to be learning stuff. As you go through training, it gets more and more testing, probably mentally than physically, I would say. At first, it's very physical. You're doing PT sessions 2 or 3 times a day. You're out in the field. You're getting thrashed. Thrashed is what they call it when you stuff up, and then they just absolutely thrash you. One of the sayings is, we're going to thrash you till your eyeballs bleed, and it might be. It's usually when there's no prying eyes around. So when you're off camp and you're out in the learning your field craft, they'll find a massive hill, and it'll be I remember once. We'd stuffed up in the morning and got thrashed from 8 a.m. till 4:30 p.m.
And so thrashing is just making you do horrible exercise for a long, like it's just...
Fireman's carries up and down this, it looked like a mountain to me. It probably wasn't.
Yeah.
Probably was just a little bit of a gradual incline, but by the end of it, it felt like a mountain. But it's just fireman's carries, duck walks, crawling on the ground, burpees, running. It's just constant. And it might go on for 10 minutes. It might go on for, pretty much went on for sort of 6 hours or 8 hours that day. It was absolutely crazy. And, people drop out on that as well. People will leave on that. You might get...
What's the rate? Yeah, how many people are dropping out?
I don't know. Depends what phase of training you're in and how hard the beast... It's called a beasting or a thrashing. It depends how hard it is, I suppose. You know, we started with around 80 so blokes, maybe 85 blokes, and finished up with about 15 at the end after 8 months.
Yeah.
So it's a reasonably high attrition rate, and they go for different reasons. Some really good people get injured. You know, some people decide it's not for them, and some people don't make the grade, I suppose, over time.
And so all that time you're learning. You mentioned your field craft, so that's how to fight, how to move on terrain safely, and all that
Basically,
kind of stuff.
How to survive in arduous conditions, how to move tactically, how to fight in different types of terrain as well. So the main job of a commando is usually
I don't really even know what it is. So yeah, go ahead.
we do reconnaissance tasks. So we'll go in before other troops go in. We'll assess the lie of the land, and we'll also do direct operations as well. So strike stuff. More so when I was leaving commandos, we're going down the route of doing more direct action stuff. So more strikes on enemy troops. We work in probably anywhere from 30 to 40 man teams as well with attached ranks. And we'll get reconnaissance from one of the special forces units like SAS. They'll go in and do some reconnaissance, or maybe something like in the UK it was MI6 as well, or one of the government agencies. They'll do intelligence on something, and then we'll go in and do a strike on it.
Wow.
So we're learning to – commandos are basically – they come from the Boer term for guerrilla. Mm-hmm. So you use guerrilla tactics. Basically you work with a smaller than conventional sized force, and you go in and directly sort of affect operations. You move in, do a strike, and then you disappear and blend back into your environment again. And then a couple of days later you'll pop up somewhere different, you'll strike at a different spot, and you're just disrupting enemy operations and making it harder for them to reorganise and you know, don't give them time to do a counter-strike. You basically pull back before they do. So,
And so when you're doing it, so it's 30 of you go in at a time, or is it even smaller than that sometimes?
Yeah, you wouldn't really want to go anywhere with less than 30 blokes. You're small enough as it is, and often you're coming up against, 100, 150 enemy troops at a time, possibly more if you're going into a big area.
So 30 of you going up against 150, but you know that what you're doing, they don't know, so that's your advantage.
They don't know we're coming. They don't know where we're going to be. They don't know how many of us there are. We have a ability to put a high rate of fire down, so we carry a lot of weapons amongst a small group, and we can provide enough fire to make it seem like there's a much bigger force there as well.
And stupid question, why wouldn't you just take, if they've got 150, why wouldn't you take 70? What's the advantage of the 30?
There's no need, if you do things properly, you've got highly trained guys and determined guys, you can go in and disrupt. It's hard to move around a bigger group of people.
Okay, that's the downside.
Yeah, it's more obvious as well. So if you've got a big, crew of 150, 200 people, it's easy to find. You've got to support that. You need food, logistics. You need
You're
a
more
hide
agile
that as well.
without it.
Much more agile. Yeah, exactly. It's like when you look at you look at boxing, for example, you've got the super heavyweights, just big bruising blokes that stand there, and just one punch from them will probably knock you out. But you look at the smaller guys, they're able to get around a lot more, get in, get out, throw punches. That's probably more like what our tasking was. Working in a small group, we're much more agile. We can pick up, lift and shift quite quickly. We can move in, strike, pull back, move into a different location.
And are you moving in is it you delivered by a helicopter, or are you on ground vehicles? How does...
Depends on what you're doing, You can be delivered by small boats. You can be delivered by helicopter. Most of the operations we did were helicopters, but helicopters are noisy as well. You can get deployed by a parachute as well. You can walk in.
You've done that?
Parachute? No, I didn't, no. It's not used much these days. There was a bit of parachuting in Afghanistan, but they had, I think it was like 25% casualties on landing because they were landing at night.
That's a high rate.
Oh, massively.
Before you've even got going.
They have to cancel operations. They literally parachute in. I remember it was the SBS, the Special Boat Service, which is the naval equivalent of the SAS in the UK. They did what they call HAHO, which is high altitude, high opening. So they jump on oxygen at, say, 30,000 feet. They pull their chutes, and then they navigate maybe over 50K under canopy,
right? Because
you can't hear them. You can't see them. It's silent.
Yeah.
The bad thing, there's another one called Halo, which is high altitude, low opening, but you can hear the crack of the parachute. So they can actually navigate big distances using technology like GPS. Yeah, at night time with night vision on, it creates a disproportionate perception of what's around you. So when they land, they're actually not stable and people go over on ankles, and they actually had to cancel a lot of the operations or abort a lot of the major operations because of that. So parachuting's not very, not very highly used in that sort of stuff these days.
And so you did that for how long?
7 years all up.
That's a long time.
7 years, yeah. Yeah, it was a long time. It was a big part of my life, and it was very fast paced. If you're not serving on operations in Afghanistan, you're training for different types of fields. We did a lot of Arctic warfare training in the Arctic Circle in the north of Norway.
Wow.
We did jungle training. I went to the Caribbean and did jungle warfare training there. I did a lot of desert work. That's the major conflict at the time when I was in. So, we'd be in Oman and places like that doing that. I did amphibious training. We do a lot of amphibious beach reconnaissance, and we do a lot of raids on, coastal areas. We're heavily amphibious as well. So one of the best packages I did was living on board a naval ship off the coast of Holland and doing strikes into different targets, coastal targets in Holland. So basically, we'd have to try and get in without being seen, move up, attack and assault the compound, and then pull back. Guerrilla tactics again. You're in before they know what happens. You've achieved your objective and you've pulled back quickly.
Yeah. And how do you do that? How do you replicate? I mean, I imagine nothing replicates actually, an operation. But how do you replicate that in your training? How do you go close to that in terms of making it, as close as you can get it to real?
It's really hard. It's really hard. You just there's never going to be the same pressure on you that being in what we call the two-way range, where you're firing and they're firing back at you. You can't replicate that, You can use simunition, which is a thing we do heavily use in a lot of the counter-terrorist taskings we do, which is basically a normal weapon which uses special paintball rounds. So, we were using the MP5 and the I think it was the Browning pistol at the time, bought out, and they used special 9mm paint rounds.
Do they hurt?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like how, give us a comparison that a norm, what would I compare it to in terms of?
It's producing a lot of force and it's very concentrated. So you'll probably have, a welt on you that's very purple for about 3 or 4 centimetres in circumference.
Yep.
Yeah. It's
so like being hit by a sharp little cricket ball or much worse?
Yeah, take a cricket ball thrown full pelt but make it about half the size. So it's got some weight. It's not got the weight behind it of a cricket ball.
But it's got the velocity, so it's got that impact.
100%, yeah. And I remember...
So you're pretty motivated to not get hit.
Oh, yeah. Like guys will do all sorts of stuff. Most people will take an extra thick military grade sock to put down their jocks just to protect your little fella.
Yeah.
But it's usually a rite of passage that the first couple of times you go through, you don't wear any of it. You've got armour, but you don't wear that. So you can get a good feeling for what it's like. And I remember the first time I was introduced to, we were doing the nuclear counter-terrorist stuff up in, where were we? Lyddon Hive down in Kent. So we've got a massive sort of kill house down there as well. It's an old castle and you can move around the entire inside of the place to suit whatever situation you want to. There's gantries running along the top where whoever's instructing can walk along and watch what you do real time, and it's also filmed as well, so you can see where your muzzles are pointing at different times. And so I remember the first run through there, they turn the lights off, pump it full of smoke, put the speakers on and crank loads of noise out, and you've just got to go through it. And every time it's a different layout, you don't know what you're going to find. And I remember everything's done silently as well. So if you find yourself as the front man, you're going to be the entry man to whatever door it is. Whoever's behind you is going to take charge of that situation. And I remember coming across this big set of doors and the lads were literally like, I wasn't first, but someone pushed me to the front and I was like, what's going on here? Anyway, so I'm standing in front of the door waiting for it. Doorman opened it and I went through and it was blinding. It was bright light and the door slammed shut behind me. I was like, where am I? And I turned around and I'm outside the compound and there was another building which is used for watching, usually you have some sort of high vantage position to provide cover. So this was what we call a cover building. Basically, you could view exit points and pass information back up to the hierarchy. And I'm sitting there and there's all these windows and suddenly about 6 blokes popped up in all the different windows and waved at me. And I was like, what's going on here? And I'm like, oh no, I know what's going on here. And I'm trying to open the door and they all just pulled up their MP5s, which is an automatic 9mm. And just started there was nowhere to hide. It was like 5 meters by 5 meters of space in this little courtyard. I was trying to open the door. The guys were holding it from the other side. And I'm just trying to go side on so that the rest of my body's not taking these hits and they're just spraying me up and down. And that was a bit of an initiation and welcome to the team, that one.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was in pain for days after that.
Intense. And so you did that for 7 years, and you mentioned before disharmony. That tell us about when things go wrong and how that goes in a situation like that.
It goes back to what we were talking about before. How do you train for a war-like situation? And you can't. You can do everything you want, but when you get out there, you see people can't hide. There's nowhere to hide. You see people for who they really are. And some people are very good at blending into their situation and letting you know what they want you to. But when you're out there and someone is actively trying to kill you and you're in what we consider a pretty crappy situation, real personalities come out. And I'm sure some people see things in themselves they don't like, and some people see things in other people they don't like. And sometimes you get what we call a bully who's a big, alpha bloke back on camp, and suddenly, faced with life-threatening situations, is completely terrified and may shut down as well. And we saw this on countless sort of occasions. When
Are they more likely to than others, or?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, people mask insecurity with this sort of fake bravado and cockiness. I think it's because they don't like who they are. They feel the need to try and change that. It might be because, they're just not that sure of themselves. And sure enough, when you get out there, a lot of the people who are the bigger sort of bully, jock type, alpha lads really sort of come unstuck as well. And don't get me wrong, some of them are, do or die all the way to the end, like they're strong blokes. But I just found that there was a bigger concentration of people who thought they were or acted all that back on camp. When they were put in these testing situations, they were very different. And, we worked at a pretty high operational tempo. We were flying around different parts of Afghanistan, as a regional task force doing strike ops on, whatever intelligence was created, working with a lot of different international partner forces. But, you take a lot of alpha male type people, you put them in a small environment together, and you basically, make them fight for their life on a daily basis without any unwinding time, and people just start to grate on each other, and it's over silly things, You'd see lads, punching each other over leaving stuff in their bed space, you know what I mean, or spilling out there. And this is where it comes back to, being accountable of your equipment and concealing your stuff into your space out of basic respect. But it doesn't take much. Personalities start to grind on each other that may not have. You don't have that outlet. You can't just go off camp for a couple of days or a couple of hours or have some downtime. You're living with people that you may not have chosen directly to be with. So it's about making sure, and this is where your build-up or your pre-preparation training becomes so important, trying to fit the right personalities into the right teams, trying to make sure that you've put people together in enough of a stressful situation that you can see what they're like and how they're going to react. And, you can take as much of the guesswork out as possible, but you can never take all of it.
And so what are the great operators like? The people that, what do you see that's separating? So, so the bad operators might be more bluster and have that insecurity. What are the traits that the great operators have?
An unwavering professionalism and attention to small detail.
Right.
Being a good soldier is doing the basics to a obsessive level. It's about personal discipline with everything you do. So just for example, when you're on a patrol, there's a lot of information coming in and there's a lot of distraction, but just being able to do the basics. So because we're working in, say, a 6 or 8 man team, depending on what the operation is, you're relying on manoeuvring to an objective. You need constant information coming in. So the guys you're working with need to be constantly on, we call it switched on, and looking around and passing information to either myself, who is a team commander, or, just back to the boss in general. So we work as sort of 2 to 3 assaulting groups, or 2 assault groups and a fire support group. So you basically don't move anywhere without support. So you've got 3 elements on the ground moving at different times, making sure the other element's covered, passing information. So when one group goes forward, finds a position where they can create overwatch of the area, they'll then pass information on to us, the other elements, who are leapfrogging into different positions and moving on a target. So just being able to have that personal discipline, your weapon is always cleaned and functional. You're always fit and healthy. You're making sure you sleep. You're making sure you eat because it's so hard to do out there. You're not sleeping a lot, you're not eating a lot. And just making sure that you're doing everything you can to help the team as much as possible. Everyone's fighting for that same purpose, and passing information back and making sure you're giving a good ground picture. But, you know, when the crap hits the fan, you never know how you're going to react until that first time you put under that situation as well. And that's when you see professionalism. But yeah, the guys I always thought were the best were usually quieter guys. They kept to themselves. They could work with anyone. They could fit into any environment. They never caused any conflict, and they were always ready to go on time, ready for anything that would pop up, and always had the right equipment with them as well, which is so key. I mean, you carry so much, not just mission-specific equipment, depending on the job you're doing. You know, you might need a shotgun for door hinges. You might need a sledgehammer. You might need a ladder. You might need all sorts of stuff. You might need extra grenades, extra rockets, stuff like that, depending on what you think you're going into. And so to make sure everyone's accountable for their own equipment, and team stores as well.
Tell us about, because there's a myth that people, that soldiers aren't scared. That there's sort of this idea. Sometimes I think that's just that bravery is, I think some people think it's like the absence of fear, but it's actually not. Tell us about that side of things and what you learn, what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, there's no such thing as absence of fear, and anyone who tells you they weren't scared is absolutely lying. Bravery to me is not the absence of fear, and I think this is sort of paraphrasing a little bit from a famous quote, but it's taking action in the face of fear. That's what bravery is. You're terrified, but you take action anyway that you know is possibly going to jeopardize your life. That's what bravery is to me. To be honest, I was on more than one occasion where I thought I was going to die. I was absolutely terrified. I got blown up by a suicide bomber. I was very lucky that day. I mean, I had instances where we'd get into a massive battle with the enemy and I'd have bullet holes in my clothing and in my backpack at the end of the day. And you don't have time to think about things. And this is where training is so important. And they always say, train hard, fight easy, sweat lots in training, bleed less in war. They drill you so much, and I never really understood why we were drilling. And I knew we were practicing and training, but this automatic mode switches on and you go back to being on the range, being in a safe training environment. And it's almost like you're out, you're not situational, well, you are situationally aware, but you're not aware of the danger to that level. You have a threat in front of you, your mind starts responding to it as if you're in training, and you start trying to seek out how to get the battle advantage of whatever that can be. Where's the threat coming from? How do I make myself safe? And then how do I neutralize that objective? And it's actually crazy. You go into almost a dreamlike or a hypnotic state to a certain degree.
Like a flow state kind of, yeah? Yeah, exactly. It's the perfect mix of adrenaline and clarity. So when adrenaline kicks in, obviously your heart rate elevates, you start pumping more oxygenated blood to working skeletal muscle. Your mind narrows in to focus on the task at hand. It's almost like you become a fighting machine. Your sole purpose right then is to deal with that situation. You're not thinking about, have I paid my rent this week, or, am I going to be able to afford that new pair of shoes I want? There's this absolute crystal clear focus on the objective at hand, because if you don't, you're right, it's over. And does time slow down a little? Do you have that sense of that?
Yes, I remember one particular time. This is probably one of the dodgiest situations I've ever been in. And we'd been doing an operation at night, which is when we normally like to work. We've got night vision, the enemy don't. So for us, it's, we have a massive advantage that we can see them and they can't see us. But we'd been held up and we were stuck in the daylight, and the sun was coming up. And it's not a position we like to be in. We're a small element, usually working far behind enemy lines, and there might be a mass of troops there as well. So we're kind of on edge as it is. And so we had our three elements moving back to a helicopter pickup, and one of the teams was bounding through. So two of us were in dead ground, resting and watching while the other team moved. And suddenly they got contacted from an enemy position, and they had some pretty big firepower, some PKMs and some RPGs and things like that. So that's a big machine gun and those rocket-propelled grenades. And so they were getting smashed, and they were right in the open. They had no cover. They were firing back, but basically without us being able to to provide suppressive fire on the enemy, they couldn't pull back properly. So the boss pulled us in and said, right, Skip, you need to get your team down to this building, get up on the roof and find out where the enemy is and just start suppressing them. So we'll put a heavy rate of fire down and hold their heads down so that our team can extract. By this time, our other team had taken a casualty as well. We were unable to find out at this stage how bad the casualty was and, what they sort of needed. But from what the radio said, they were going to need to be carried out. They couldn't walk. They were immobile. So basically I had about 400 metres of open ground to run across to get to this building to then get my team up on the roof and start suppressing with as much firepower as we had. So I basically got the team, we sat down together and had a look at the open ground, and I said, boys, there's no easy way to go about this tactically. We're just going to sprint from this side to this side as fast as we can. We just need to get there and get up and provide suppressive fire.
400 metres laid out 400 metres around a track doesn't seem like, but you lay it out lengthwise. That's a long distance it's nearly half a K.
And you've got 60 kilos on you as well. Yeah. So I'll have body armour, helmet. I've got enough rockets, grenades, rifle-mounted grenades, weapons, ladders, food, water. You've got everything on your back as well. So I just said, lads, let's just go. And we ran across this open ground. I'm like, just get there. Don't bunch up. Have 5 to 10 feet in between you, which means that you are hard to target. They can't just group at clumpings of blokes. And the whole enemy field opened up. So we didn't realise the extent of it. Was obviously a gun line. We'd walked into an ambush, basically, that they'd set for us. And there seemed to be about 5 or 6 machine gun positions and rocket-propelled grenades just all basically side onto us, which just went, all right, this is basically just duck hunt. Here we go. Let's just pick them off. And I remember running and thinking, shit, in the movies they're always saying when you get adrenaline, your weight seems light and you run really fast. Everything slowed right down. Slowed down so much, and I felt so heavy and tired from the adrenaline just pumping through my system. And I remember running and looking at the ground, and one of the guys, Jason, was in front of me. And I just remember all the dust kicking up as the bullets whizzed past his feet and between his legs. And I remember going, shit, if I run faster, I'm going to run into a bullet. If I run slower, I'm going to run into a bullet. I'm like, all right, I'm dead. I'm about to die. And I remember looking up and seeing the spirals through the air of the bullets whizzing past my face. And you can hear a crack and thump when you're on the range. But what I hadn't heard up until this, and this was one of my first big contacts back in the day, was this whizzing sound and that's the bullet passing within a couple of centimetres of your ear. Is you hear this kind of buzzing as it tears through the air next to you. But seeing those spirals of the distorted air going past my face, and I just thought, that's it, I'm done. I'm about to die here. I just thought it's a matter of time. Just keep going, but you're going to die, or one of your lads is just about to die. And we sprinted and got this 400 metres, dived into the cover behind the building, and then everyone just looked at each other and burst out laughing. Absolute hysterics. Just laughing like no one's ever laughed before. It was just absolutely insane. And then I was like, all right, we're here to do a job. We need to crawl up. But by this point, the enemy had completely turned on our position, and they were trying to flank us to the side as well. So they'd all turned their attention on us. We had a wall that was about a foot high that we were hiding behind, and we could not stick anything up to get a look. We were just getting absolutely hammered. And I just remember thinking, I got on the net to the boss. I'm like, right, boss, we've become the target now. We're getting smashed. They're trying to flank us to the side. And they were getting excited. The rate of fire was picking up and it was hard. And I remember curling up into a ball and pulling my legs up to my chest and watching all the bullets hitting the wall behind me and all the dust around my feet and thinking, I need to try and become inside this wall. And I was like, right, we need to take action here. This is not working. We don't know where the enemy are at the moment. We can't see. So first off, we need to identify the enemy. So I chatted to the guys with the machine guns and said, right, I need you guys to get up, fire at the highest rate you can straight on, and I'm going to use my binoculars to try and find where the enemy position is. So they jumped up at first and just started firing with their machine guns from the hip. It quietened down the firing. We managed to find roughly where the enemy was. They were in 2 positions at this spot. They were about 250 metres ahead of us, firing from the base of a wall of a building, and then there was about 100 metres probably to our left as well. We ducked down behind the wall, and the fire started to increase. They started to get closer, and we basically called in indirect fire. So that's mortars. So we have a position set up, wherever we have access to different assets. We didn't have Apache helicopters this time, so we're relying on these mortars just coming in and dropping direct on the enemy as well. But it got really close for a while there. We were trying to get up and fight where we could and firing. And I remember at one stage we were firing and I was like, what is that noise? And it was me screaming as I was firing. Just
Really?
so caught up in the moment and just so focused. And I was screaming as I was firing my weapon and jumped up. We have 66 millimeter rockets, just putting everything we had. We have underslung grenade launchers on our rifles. I mean, we pack a lot of punch for a military team. That's what we do. And we managed to hold these guys off until the indirect fire came in and silenced them. But yeah, it's just everything was so slow and focused on what you're doing. And it's kind of good because it allows you to assess a battle picture or a picture of whatever's in front of you. But it also slows you down a little bit as well. But this is one big thing I took away from this is that no decision needs to be made quickly. No matter how long, you've always got time.
Got more time.
And the longer you spend on a decision, the better that decision's going to be. We call it a condor moment in the Royal Marine Commandos. It's called a condor moment. So it's when that initial contact happens, you take a second step back and you assess as much as you can as the battle picture, and you make a slow time decision as opposed to just reacting straight away. Don't get me wrong, when you're ambushed, there's nothing you can do. You've got to react. But that's only to suppress the enemy, to get back into a position to take that condor moment. You try and take that as much as you can.
I love that term. Where does the term condor moment come from? Is that a bird flying high, seeing the whole picture?
I'm not too sure. Yeah, I think it might be. One of our commando units is called Condor, so I'm not sure if it comes from a battle on, or actually I'm going to go home and look that up, and I'll message it to you later.
We'll put it in the
I'll
show
find
notes.
out.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
But it's just about taking that time to make your assessments of what's happening around you and taking in every variable at play there to make a decision, not just reacting. It's having action, not being reactive, I suppose.
Because often that can be, it can be as little as 5 seconds. It's not necessarily taking 3 minutes. It's just taking that beat and just sort of measuring twice, cutting once in terms of just assessing what's actually happening. Yeah.
Whatever time you've got. Another saying we have is, when you're packing your backpack to go on operations, packing your backpack takes as long as you've got. If you've got 10 minutes, you'll pack it in 10 minutes. If you've got 4 hours, it will take you 4 hours, Take the time that you can afford, take as long as you can, and make that decision. Just assess all the variables and make that decision. And I think that's so important in my life now is, there's this temptation to just react to whatever happens to you, but a reaction never leads to a good end result. It's always got to be take in the information, listen to what's being said, collect as much information as you can, take that away, process it, and then, move forward from there.
So as you then transitioned out of military life, obviously that skill set's going to be massively beneficial anywhere you take it, really. I'm curious to know, you retired out of the military, so you're done. Yep. Were you pretty lost afterwards, or did you have a clear mission of, okay, what's next?
Yeah, well, I left Afghanistan on my 2008-2009 tour. I left the military. I then returned to the UK and left the military. And within 3 to 4 months of that, I left the UK and moved back to Australia. So within the space of sort of 12 months, I completely changed my life. My mental state at the time was very different to what it is now. I'd probably undergone quite a few years of trauma without really understanding what was going on, and shifted my focus completely. Like I was, absolutely loving the military. It was my life, and I was going to spend the rest of my time there and progress my career there. But, I think that 2008, 2009 tour just completely disrupted my plans of where I was and what I wanted, and I just needed to get out. And I wandered around aimlessly for I knew when I got out that I wanted to get into fitness. It'd always been a massive passion of mine, health and fitness. The Commandos, you're probably in the top 5% of fitness in the country, if not the world. You're people who take your fitness very seriously. A lot of us used to train twice a day. It was very competitive like that as well.
Okay.
A lot of your kudos came off how fit you were or how strong you were or how mentally resilient you were. So there was a lot of time and effort spent on that, and I just found an absolute passion for it. I came out, I started doing group fitness, funnily enough, like military boot camp style fitnesses in the UK for my partner at the time's dad and, some of their friends.
So delivering that.
Delivering that, yeah. It's my first sort of experience to delivering fitness programs. I decided I wanted to do a PT course. I decided to move back to Australia where I was supported. So I moved back here where I had the support of my parents, moved back home for a while and did my PT course at the Australian Institute of Fitness, the AIF at the time in what must have been, 2011 I think it was.
Okay.
And just absolutely found a passion for it, loved it.
Let's take a short break because you've run out of water and I'm worried you're going to run dry, and we'll come back in just a minute. And before you go, hear from our alumni about the online mentorship.
I learnt the theory stuff at uni, but I didn't know how to apply it, and coming to Core Advantage was how I bridged that gap. So I knew the stuff, but I didn't know how to do the stuff.
It was something that I needed to do personally for my own development, and it's allowed me to work in elite sport for now 5 years, so it was a massive help.
I think mentorship is really important, and being able to ask questions all the time, and the Core Advantage course allows that because there is a big team of people that you can ask questions.
I get to, train professional athletes every week, work really closely with professional athletes, which is awesome. A lot of the skills that I'm applying, I learned through the program at Core Advantage.
It's not just something that you read and then think about and then go, how does that tie into everything? It's something that practical that you can turn around and go, this is exactly how I'm going to apply it.